Here's a question that keeps me up at night. Not equations, not particles. Something much stranger. Pinch yourself. Go ahead. Feel that. There is something there. Something that feels the pinch. Something that is aware of it. Now here's the disturbing part. We know exactly what your skin is made of. Atoms, carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen. We know what your nerves are made of. The same stuff. We know what your brain is made of. Roughly 86 billion neurons connected by about 100 trillion synapses. All of it atoms. Just atoms. So where is the thing that felt the pinch? Point to it. You'll point to your head. Everyone does. But when we open the head, when we look inside with all our sophisticated instruments, we find neurons. We find electrical signals. We find chemistry. We never find the thing that is doing the experiencing. This is not a small puzzle. It may be the deepest problem in all of science. And after everything physics has accomplished, we still do not have the faintest idea what is really going on. By the end of this talk, you will understand what the real question is. You will see why the easy answers fail. And you might walk away wondering whether the universe is far stranger than any of us have dared to imagine. Let me start with something simple, something familiar. Look around the room you are in. You see colors. You see shapes. You hear sounds. You may feel the chair beneath you or the floor under your feet. All of this feels obvious, natural, just the way things are. But stop and think about what is actually happening. Light reflects off objects. Electromagnetic radiation, photons. They enter your eyes and strike the retina, triggering electrical signals in the optic nerve. Those signals travel to the back of your brain, to a region called the visual cortex. Neurons fire, patterns form, and then something extraordinary happens, something utterly inexplicable. You see red, you see blue, you experience a world, but the light itself is not red. It is just electromagnetic radiation with a wavelength of about 700 nanometers. There is nothing red about it. The neurons firing in your brain are not red either. They are cells doing chemistry, ions flowing, electrical potentials changing. So where does the red come from? Philosophers call this qualia, the felt qualities of experience, the redness of red, the painfulness of pain, the taste of chocolate. These are not just information, they are experiences. Someone is home having them. I once wrote a short poem about this, standing at the seashore, watching the waves, mountains of molecules, each stupidly minding its own business, trillions apart, yet forming white surf in unison. And there I am, atoms with consciousness, matter with curiosity, a universe of atoms, an atom in the universe. That is the puzzle. How do atoms become aware? Now you might think we already know the answer. The brain, obviously consciousness comes from the brain, but that is not an answer. That is just pointing to the box where the mystery lives. Let me give you an analogy. Suppose I ask how a car moves and you say the engine. Fair enough. But what about the engine? There are pistons. They move up and down. What makes them move? Fuel explodes. Pressure builds. The pistons are pushed. Now we are getting somewhere. We can trace the entire chain. Fuel burns, gases expand, pistons move, the crankshaft turns, the wheels spin, the car moves. Every step is physical, mechanical. We understand each link. Now try the same thing with the brain. Photons hit the retina. Electrical signals travel along nerves. Neurons fire in complex patterns. And then somehow you experience the color red. Where is that step? What is the mechanism that converts electrical activity into felt experience? Nobody knows. We do not even know what kind of explanation would count as a satisfying answer. This is what David Chalmers calls the hard problem of consciousness, not the easy problems. The easy problems are things like how the brain processes information, controls behavior, integrates sensory signals. Those are difficult engineering problems, but they are tractable. We can imagine solving them. The hard problem is different. The hard problem is why there is any experience at all, why all this information processing is accompanied by an inner life, why there is something it is like to be you. Put another way, imagine you could build a perfect robot. It sees, hears, moves, speaks. It does everything you do. From the outside, it behaves exactly like a conscious being. But inside, nothing. No experience, no inner life. Just machinery processing information in the dark. Is such a robot possible? We do not know. But here is the crucial point. From physics alone, from chemistry alone, from neuroscience alone, we cannot tell the difference. Nothing in our equations says that some arrangements of matter should have inner experiences while others should not. The philosopher Thomas Nagel highlighted this with a famous question. What is it like to be a bat? Bats navigate the world using sonar. They emit high-frequency sounds and listen for the echoes. From this, they perceive shape, distance, texture, and motion in complete darkness. You can try to imagine this. You close your eyes, you picture sending out sounds and hearing them bounce back. But Nagel argues that this misses the point. You are imagining what it would be like for you to have sonar. You are not imagining what it is like to be a bat. The bat has its own inner life, its own experiences, its own way of being in the world. And we cannot access that. Not because we lack information, but because experience is fundamentally subjective. It exists only from a particular point of view. This is the heart of the problem. Science is objective. It studies things from the outside. We measure, quantify, and model. Consciousness, by contrast, is subjective. It exists from the inside, and we do not know how to bridge that gap. Now let me make this even more puzzling. Your brain contains about 86 billion neurons, roughly as many as there are stars in the Milky Way. Each neuron connects to thousands of others, for a total of around 100 trillion connections. That number is almost impossible to grasp. If you counted to 100 trillion one number per second, it would take over 3 million years. And these neurons are spread throughout your brain. Visual processing happens in the back. Sound is processed on the sides, touch along the top. Different features of the same object, color, shape, location, motion, are handled in different regions. Yet when you look at an apple, you do not experience fragments scattered across space. You experience one apple, one unified percept. How does the brain bind all these distributed processes into a single coherent experience? This is known as the binding problem, and no one has solved it. Some researchers proposed an answer, synchrony. Neurons that fire together wire together. If neurons in different regions fire in synchrony, often around 40 cycles per second, the so-called gamma rhythm, maybe that is what binds features into a single percept. It is an appealing idea, and there is some evidence for neural synchrony. But synchrony does not explain experience. It only shifts the mystery. If neurons A, B, and C all fire at 40 hertz, that tells us something about timing. It does not tell us why that activity feels like anything. It does not explain why there is an experiencer who experiences the apple. Here is another way to see the problem. There are neurons firing in my brain right now. There are neurons firing in your brain right now. Some of them may even be firing at the same frequency. But we do not share a consciousness. Your experience is yours. Mine is mine. Why? Neurons are just cells. They do not know whose brain they are in. They simply obey chemistry and physics. So what makes your neural activity your experience and mine? I do not know. And as far as I can tell, nobody knows. Now let me take you one step deeper down the rabbit hole. Your brain is made of atoms, about 7 octillion of them. That is a 7 followed by 27 zeros. Those atoms are made of smaller parts, protons, neutrons, and electrons. Protons and neutrons are made of quarks. Electrons, as far as we know, are fundamental. Now ask this. Take a single atom out of your brain. Are you still conscious? Of course you are. One atom cannot matter. You lose atoms all the time. And yet somehow when enough of them are arranged and active in just the right way, consciousness appears. That is the mystery. And we are still nowhere near understanding how you breathe them out, you sweat them out, they get replaced. The atoms in your body today are not the same atoms that were there 7 years ago. Almost all of them have been swapped out. So consciousness does not depend on any particular atoms. It must depend on the arrangement, the pattern, the information. But wait, the atoms are not really solid things. They are mostly empty space. The nucleus is tiny. The electrons are somewhere in a cloud of probability, and the forces between them are electromagnetic. When you touch something, you're not really touching anything. Electrons in your hand are repelling electrons on the table. It is all fields and forces, so your brain is not really a thing. It is a pattern of activity in fields, electromagnetic fields, quantum fields, a constantly shifting dance of energy. And somehow that dance knows it is dancing. There is an idea that has been gaining attention. Maybe consciousness is not produced by the brain in the way a generator produces electricity. Maybe consciousness is more like what electricity is to the generator. Let me explain. The brain generates electromagnetic fields. Whenever neurons fire, they create tiny fluctuations in the electric and magnetic fields around them. These fields extend through and beyond the brain. You can measure them with EEG. You can measure them with MEG. Now, some researchers suggest that these electromagnetic fields are not just byproducts. They might be where consciousness lives. The idea is that the unified field integrates information in a way that scattered neurons cannot. When neurons fire synchronously, their fields add up. Constructive interference. When they fire out of sync, their fields cancel out. Destructive interference. This would explain the binding problem. The field is not scattered like the neurons. The field is everywhere all at once. It could bind experiences together because it is inherently unified. Is this the answer? I do not know. It is an interesting idea, but it still does not explain why an electromagnetic field should feel like anything. Magnets have fields. Radios have fields. We do not think they are conscious. Why should the brain's field be different? Let me try another angle. Some physicists have suggested that consciousness might involve quantum mechanics. This is a tempting idea because quantum mechanics is already strange. Particles can be in two places at once. Measurements can affect outcomes. Entanglement connects distant things in spooky ways. Roger Penrose, a brilliant mathematician, proposed that quantum effects in tiny structures inside neurons might be important for consciousness. The structures are called microtubules. They are part of the cell's skeleton. Penrose and Stuart Hammers suggested that quantum computations in these microtubules might give rise to conscious experiences. This is a bold idea, but there is a problem. The brain is warm and wet. Quantum effects are delicate. They get destroyed very quickly in such environments. Most physicists think the brain is too noisy for quantum mechanics to play a significant role. But here's the thing. Even if quantum effects were involved, it would not really solve the problem. Quantum mechanics is still physics. It tells us how things behave, not why they feel like anything. Saying consciousness is quantum does not explain consciousness. It just makes it quantum and mysterious instead of classical and mysterious. We keep running into the same wall. We can describe the brain in more and more detail. We can map every neuron, trace every connection, measure every signal, and at the end of it all, we still do not know why any of this activity is accompanied by experience. Let me try a thought experiment. This is the kind of thing I love. Let us really push our intuitions. Imagine we could record every single thing happening in your brain while you look at a red apple. Every neuron firing, every chemical released, every electrical potential changing. We store all this information in a computer. Now imagine we play it back. We recreate all the exact same signals in a different brain, or maybe in an artificial system. The patterns are identical. Does this new system experience seeing a red apple? You might think, yes, same pattern, same experience. But wait, we could slow it down. Play the recording at half speed. Is the experience now in slow motion? We could play it backwards. Does the system experience seeing the apple disappear? We could scramble the recording, play all the signals in random order. Is there still an experience? Presumably not. But why not? Every signal still occurs. Every component is there. The difference is the relationships between them, the structure. So consciousness depends on structure. Fine, but what structure? What makes one arrangement conscious and another not? Here is an even stranger version. Imagine we write down all the information about your brain at a single moment, all the positions and states of all the particles. We put this information in a book, a very large book. Is the book conscious? It contains all the same information as your brain at that moment. You probably want to say no. The book is just ink on paper. It is not doing anything. There is no activity, no process unfolding over time. And that seems important. Consciousness does not appear to require information alone. It seems to require processing, change, activity, dynamics. But how much processing? And what kind? We do not have clear answers. Let me tell you something that really bothers me. We know a great deal about how the brain works. We know which regions become active when you see faces. We know which areas are involved when you feel fear. We know that damage to specific regions produces specific deficits. Damage the fusiform face area and face recognition breaks down. Damage the hippocampus and the ability to form new memories disappears. This is all remarkable neuroscience. But notice what it gives us. Correlations. Brain activity correlates with experience. We identify neural correlates of consciousness. But correlates are not explanations. If I tell you that a thermometer reading correlates with temperature, I have not explained temperature. The thermometer is just measuring something. The real question is, what is being measured? Likewise, when we identify neural correlates of consciousness, we learn where and when consciousness is associated with brain activity. But we do not learn how or why that activity becomes experience. Some people think this is simply a matter of progress. Once neuroscience is advanced enough, the mystery will dissolve. Consciousness will turn out to be an emergent property, like wetness emerges from water molecules. Individual molecules are not wet. Put enough of them together and wetness appears, but I am not convinced this analogy works. Wetness is not a deep mystery. We understand what it means for something to be wet. Molecules move, they stick, they flow. Wetness is a way of describing certain large-scale behaviors of matter. Consciousness is different. It is not just a behavior. It is not just a pattern. It is the fact that there is something it is like to be the system. That is a different kind of thing altogether. Let me put it another way. Suppose I gave you a complete physical description of a brain, every atom, every connection, every process. And suppose I asked you to predict what that person would do, what they would say, how they would behave. In principle, with enough computing power, you could do this. The brain is a physical system. It obeys physical laws. But now suppose I ask a different question. What is this person experiencing right now? What does it feel like to be them? The complete physical description does not answer that question. It cannot, because the question is asking about something subjective, something from the inside, while the physical description is entirely from the outside. This is what philosophers call the explanatory gap. There is a gap between physical descriptions and conscious experience, and we do not know how to bridge it. Some people try to avoid this problem by denying it. They say consciousness is an illusion. There is no one really home. The brain processes information and generates reports about experiences, but there is no actual experiencer. I find this very hard to take seriously. An illusion for whom? If there is an illusion, then there must be someone being fooled, and that someone is having an experience, the experience of being fooled. You cannot eliminate consciousness by calling it an illusion, because having an illusion is itself a form of experience. This is not like ordinary illusions. A mirage looks like water, but there is no water. Fine. The appearance of water is an illusion, but the appearance itself is real. You really are having a visual experience that resembles water. Saying consciousness is an illusion would be like saying the appearance itself is an illusion. But then what is having the appearance? We end up going in circles. And I think that tells us something important. Consciousness is not like other scientific problems. It may not yield to the usual methods. We may need entirely new concepts, new ways of thinking to make progress. Let me tell you what I think the situation is. And I want to be honest, this is speculation. This is a physicist at the edge of what we know, looking into the darkness. I think consciousness might be fundamental. I do not mean that everything is conscious, though some people believe that. I mean that consciousness might be like mass or charge or space-time, not derivable from something more basic, just there as a feature of reality. If this is true, then we should not expect to explain consciousness in terms of physics. We should expect to find laws that connect consciousness to physics, just as we have laws that connect mass to motion or charge to electromagnetic fields. This is not a popular view among physicists. We like to explain things. We like to reduce complex phenomena to simple components, but maybe consciousness is where reduction stops. Maybe it is bedrock. I do not know if this is right. But I think it is worth taking seriously because after centuries of trying, after all our progress in neuroscience and physics, we still have not made 1 inch of progress on the hard problem. That should tell us something. Let me leave you with this thought. You are sitting there listening to me or reading this, whatever the case may be. You are having experiences right now. The sound of these words, the sight of this room, the feeling of your body. All of this is happening. It is undeniable. It is the most certain thing there is. And yet, from the point of view of physics, you are a collection of atoms, just atoms. Carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, and a few trace elements, quarks and electrons, arranged in a very complicated pattern, yes, but still just atoms. Those atoms were forged in the hearts of stars billions of years ago. They floated through space, gathered into planets, combined into molecules, organized into cells, grew into organisms, and eventually became you. And now those atoms are looking back at the universe and wondering where they came from. Matter with curiosity, atoms with consciousness, the universe waking up to itself. Is there anything more astonishing than that? I do not have the answer to the mystery of consciousness. Nobody does. But I think it is one of the most important questions we can ask, because it is not just a question about the brain. It is a question about what we are. It is a question about what the universe is. And maybe, just maybe, when we finally understand consciousness, we will understand everything differently. We will see that the universe is not just matter in motion. We will see that it is in some deep way aware of itself and that we are that awareness, looking out through 86 billion neurons, wondering at the wonder of it all. But wait, I want to push this further because I have not told you about some of the strangest experiments, the ones that really twist your intuitions. There is a surgery called a corpus callosotomy. Doctors sometimes perform it on patients with severe epilepsy. The corpus callosum is a thick bundle of nerve fibers that connects the left and right hemispheres of your brain, about 200 million fibers. Cut it, and the hemispheres cannot talk to each other anymore. What happens? The patients seem mostly normal. They walk around, they talk, they live their lives. But when you test them carefully, something bizarre emerges. Show a picture to the left visual field. It goes to the right hemisphere. That hemisphere cannot speak because language is usually in the left hemisphere. Ask the patient what they saw and they say nothing. But ask them to draw what they saw with their left hand, which is controlled by the right hemisphere, and they draw the picture perfectly. The left hemisphere does not know what the right hemisphere saw, but the right hemisphere knew, it just could not say. Now here's the question. Does this patient have one consciousness or two? Is there one person in there with two separate streams of information, or are there two persons sharing one body, each unaware of the other? The patients say they feel like one person, but the patients who say that are using their left hemisphere to speak. What would the right hemisphere say if it could talk? We do not know. And this uncertainty goes to the heart of the mystery. What are the boundaries of a consciousness? Where does one mind end and another begin? Let me give you another thought experiment. This one really kept me up at night when I first heard it. Imagine a machine, a teleporter. It scans every atom in your body, every position, every state, everything. It transmits this information to Mars. And on Mars, it assembles a perfect copy of you from new atoms. The original here on Earth is destroyed in the scanning process. The person on Mars wakes up. They have all your memories. They think they are you. They remember stepping into the teleporter on Earth. From their perspective, there was no interruption. They blink and they are on Mars. But is that person you? Some people say yes. What matters is the pattern, not the atoms. The atoms get replaced all the time anyway. If the pattern is preserved, you are preserved. Other people say, no, you died when the scanner destroyed your body. The person on Mars is a copy, a very good copy with your memories and personality, but still a copy. A new person who falsely believes they are you. How would you decide? Both versions have the same claim to be you. Both have your memories, your personality, your sense of being you. There is no test that could distinguish them. No experiment that would reveal which one is the real you. This is deeply unsettling because it suggests that there might not be a fact of the matter. There might not be a real you that persists through time, just a series of momentary experiences stitched together by memory into the illusion of continuity. But then who is having the illusion? You see how we keep coming back to the same problem. Every time we try to think our way out of it, we end up right back where we started. There is something it is like to be you, and we do not know what that something is. Let me try yet another approach. Let us think about what consciousness does. Here's an interesting observation. Everything you are aware of is slightly in the past. Light takes time to travel to your eyes. Sound takes time to reach your ears. Nerve signals take time to reach your brain. Processing takes time. By the time you are aware of something, it happened a fraction of a second ago. But you do not experience the world as delayed. You experience it as happening now. Your brain must be doing something to stitch together information that arrives at different times. It creates a unified present moment out of scattered signals. This is another binding problem, temporal binding. How does the brain bind events from different times into a single experience of the present? And here is another puzzle. You do not experience the gaps. You blink and the world does not go dark. Your eyes make tiny movements called saccades, and during those movements you are effectively blind. But you do not notice. Your brain papers over the gaps. So your experience of the world is not a direct perception. It is a construction, a model, a best guess based on incomplete and delayed information. Your brain is a prediction machine constantly filling in the blanks, smoothing over inconsistencies, creating the appearance of a seamless, continuous reality. But here is the strange part. The construction is experienced by something. There is a viewer watching the constructed movie. Who is that viewer and where do they sit? This is where it gets really mind-bending. The viewer cannot be in the brain because the viewer would have to experience the signals from the brain, and those signals would have to be processed by something else, and that something else would need its own viewer, and we would be in an infinite regress. There is a famous argument against this called the homunculus fallacy. You cannot explain consciousness by putting a little person inside the brain who watches a screen, because then you would have to explain the consciousness of the little person. You would need a smaller person inside that person's brain, and so on forever. So consciousness cannot work like a movie theater. There is no screen, no projector, no viewer sitting in a seat.